I need to see a resident key card right now.
I am not showing you anything.
You don't belong in the penthouse wing. I know who belongs here.
Meredith, we've spoken in the elevator twice.
I'm calling the police! A gate F that! Genesee popcorn leprino! There's a suspicious man! He's being aggressive! I feel threatened!
Tell him I'm right here, Meredith.
Sterling St. James is a 45-year-old senior lead federal prosecutor for the Eastern District. He manages a team of 22 attorneys and oversees high-stakes organized crime litigation. His annual compensation exceeds $190,000, and his residence at Azure Heights is a $2.8 million unit he purchased in cash. On this Saturday, he was performing the mundane task of teaching his 7-year-old son to hold his breath underwater. Meredith Thornberry is a former real estate consultant currently involved in a series of litigious disputes with her previous employers. Her history at the complex includes 4 reported security incidents in the last 18 months, all involving non-white residents or delivery personnel. Public records indicate she has a history of escalating minor social frictions into police interventions when she perceives a challenge to her self-appointed role as community guardian. Based on Thornberry's immediate escalation to a 911 emergency call despite the lack of physical movement from the St. James family, do you believe this is a manifestation of genuine clinical paranoia? Or is it a strategic use of police force to cleanse her social environment? Share your analysis in the comments. Azure Heights is a ultra-luxury enclave in a coastal pocket of Southern California. The pool area is an architectural marvel of travertine stone, infinity edges, and imported palms. The air is thick with the scent of salt water and expensive ozone-treated water. At 1410, the ambient temperature is 84 degrees. The acoustic environment is highly reflective. Every word spoken near the stone pillars echoes, creating a sensory theater where Thornberry's accusations are amplified. This is an environment designed for privacy and exclusion, a psychological trigger for someone with Thornberry's territorial fixation. Sterling St. James remains calm because his professional life is defined by the rules of evidence. He knows that every second of Thornberry's behavior is being recorded and will eventually be scrutinized in a courtroom. Thornberry, however, interprets his calm as arrogance. To her, the fact that a black family can afford the same luxury she struggles to maintain creates a cognitive dissonance. She resolves this dissonance by recategorizing them as trespassers, a label that allows her to justify her hostility as civic duty. At 18:05, Officer Julian Caulfield and his partner arrive at the pool deck. The bodycam footage shows Caulfield walking with a brisk, heavy stride, his equipment belt jingling with the weight of his gear. "Who's the caller?" "Ma'am, step over here and tell me what's happening," Officer Caulfield says, immediately placing himself between Thornberry and the St. James family. The officer's positioning is a tactical error. He has instinctively shielded the aggressor and turned his back to the victims, signaling an immediate bias in his assessment of the threat. Thornberry begins to point and gasp, her breathing becoming performatively labored. "They wouldn't show me their key, and he threatened me when I asked. He said I'd regret it," Thornberry lies, her voice trembling. The camera footage from 1404 proves this statement is false, yet Officer Caulfield does not ask for clarification. He turns to Sterling St. James, his hand resting on his belt near his taser holster. "Sir, stand up. Hands where I can see them, and give me some ID right now," Caulfield commands, his voice dropping into a combat-ready baritone. St. James does not stand up. He remains seated on the edge of the lounge chair, a move that minimizes his profile and forces the officer to consider the lack of an immediate physical threat. "Officer Caulfield, I see your name tag. I am a resident of this building, and I have committed no crime," St. James says, his voice projecting a clinical coldness. The audio reveals a slight tremor in the officer's voice, as he realizes he is not dealing with a compliant or intimidated subject. He steps closer, invading St. James's personal space. "I'm not playing games. You're being detained for investigation of trespassing and harassment. Give me your ID or you're going in the back of the car," Caulfield says. At 14:21:30, the bodycam captures a close-up of St. James's face. His expression is one of detached observation, similar to a scientist watching a predictable chemical reaction. He slowly reaches into a waterproof bag and produces a government-issued credential. My name is Sterling St. James. I am the lead federal prosecutor for this district. This is my home, and you are currently violating the Fourth Amendment on camera, St. James states. The officer's hand, which had been unlapping the holster of his taser, stops mid-motion. He takes the credential, his eyes scanning the holographic seal of the Department of Justice. The silence that follows lasts exactly 6 seconds, a period where the officer's entire career trajectory is recalibrated. In this moment of tension, if the officer had proceeded with the arrest despite the federal credentials, would you consider that a, quote, 7 error or a criminal abuse of power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The footage at 14:23:12 shows Officer Caulfield's posture undergoing a visible collapse. His shoulders slump, and he takes a half step back, creating distance that he should have maintained from the beginning. He looks at Thornberry, who is now silent, her eyes wide as she recognizes the gold lettering on the credential. Mr. St. James, I was just... The call came in as a high-threat situation, Caulfield says, his voice now thin and apologetic. The call was a lie, and you chose to validate it without a single question to the people being accused, St. James replies, standing up to his full height. The quote 8 is captured on the partner's body cam. Caulfield is looking at the ground, his face flushed. He realizes that by threatening a federal prosecutor with quote 9 while on his own body cam, he has documented a civil rights violation against a man who literally writes the briefs on police misconduct. Thornberry attempts to slip away toward the exit, but St. James's wife speaks up. Officer, aren't you going to take a report for the false police report she just made? Or does that only apply to us? She asks. Caulfield is trapped. He cannot ignore the false report now that the victim is a high-ranking official. He is forced to stop Thornberry at the gate. The camera captures her indignant screech as the officer she summoned for protection is now forced to take her information for a potential criminal charge. The legal aftermath was not a swift explosion of karma, but a slow, grinding process of institutional accountability. Officer Julian Caulfield was placed on administrative leave the following Monday. An internal affairs review determined he had failed to exercise independent judgment, allowing a complainant's bias to dictate his use of force. He was demoted and eventually resigned before a formal termination could be finalized, moving to a different state to work in private security. The Azure Heights Management Group faced a massive civil suit. Sterling St. James did not just sue for the incident, he sued for the quote 12 to protect residents from known harassers. The discovery process unearthed Meredith Thornberry's previous complaints, proving the board knew she was a quote 13, but failed to act. The settlement was reached out of court for $7.2 million. Of this, $2 million was dedicated to a scholarship fund for minority law students, a move St. James insisted upon during negotiations. Meredith Thornberry was served an unconditional quote 14 within 30 days. Her own legal fees to defend against the false police report charges and the civil countersuit eventually drained her savings. Does a $7 million settlement truly compensate for the psychological impact of being hunted in one's own home? Or does the lack of a prison sentence for the antagonist make this a hollow victory? Join the discussion in the comments. Today, Sterling St. James still resides at Azure Heights. He is now the president of the Homeowners Association, having overhauled the security protocols and removed the private firm that allowed Thornberry's behavior to flourish. He is often seen at the pool with his family, the environment now one of genuine, rather than enforced, peace. Meredith Thornberry lives in a rented condo in a less affluent suburb. Her name is a permanent fixture in legal databases, making her a high-risk tenant for any reputable management company. She is currently representing herself in a series of failing pro-SE lawsuits, her social and financial standing permanently diminished by the very authority she tried to weaponize. The analysis of the Thornberry St. James incident reveals a fundamental truth about modern American justice. The camera has become the ultimate equalizer. Without the body cam and the cell phone footage, this would have been a he said, she said dispute that likely ended in the wrongful detention of a federal officer. In the forensic light of video evidence, bias has no place to hide, and authority without evidence is nothing more than a liability. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.